losing the internet. So we've proven that, and we've also gotten a scene that works. So,
Okay.
hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Here, I have a wonderful mentor from college, and who turned out to be a wonderful friend as well. His name is Matt, and he's over now in the Bay Area, working in the engineering industry, and I'm really glad to have him. It's been a long time since I've been able to get a hold of him, and now that we've had a spare hour ish to chat about mentorship and teamwork, it's amazing to put some time in for this. So, with that said, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jacob. It's nice to be here. It's always good to talk to you. Haven't really been able to meet up for lunch at all this year, if I remember right, because I'm all over the place. But good to be able to talk to you for an evening.
Likewise, it's been hard to break the proximity barrier for a lot of the friends that we have been able to maintain, but our lives have had to go different directions. And in your case, I mean, the Bay Area, the traffic that you deal with versus the traffic I'm dealing with it's dark and light. It's completely different. And I already deal with enough traffic up here in the Sacramento area, so there is a level of forgiveness, I think, too, that we need to give each other. It takes a lot of work to get over and see each other. So
Oh, yeah. I mean, life always changes when you go out and start working. You don't get the option to really stay next to where you want to be. I mean, you probably know that better than anybody, having gone out to North Dakota, Saudi Arabia, or Kuwait, wherever it was. Saudi Arabia, right?
Kuwait, yeah, no, I was part of
Oops.
the invasion force in 2003. Um, no, 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 it was the UAE. Yeah, you guessed right.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
All
it's one of your three guesses.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's funny. Yeah, no, I did not see Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia was right next door, but I didn't see any of it either.
yeah. But you did forget one part in your introduction, Jacob, which is that I started out as your classmate.
Oh,
So you had talked to more people on the podcast that I think you probably met through being their mentor, but we were actually peers.
we were. I was giving you the respect because there's
Because I'm
this.
old.
Well, there's that, but there's also you're giving me advice that I just couldn't access. And
Oh, that's
being
true.
being 20, the advice I could access, compared to what you've already experienced, is radically different, and that's why I want to talk to you about your backstory, so people understand how we met. Quick intro for how Matt and I met. It was in 2012, and we were in a history class of all things. We're both in chemical engineering, but we meet in a history class,
Yeah,
introduction to ancient history, and that's where we met. Even though we had at least two other classes overlapping, if not three, we met there.
right. Yeah. I think that ended up being my fourth class. So yeah, in every other class, we were probably in the same room. But
Exact same time, exact same room, exact same times of the week, but we met in the one non-engineering class.
right. That is kind of funny looking back on it.
Yeah, and with that, we were able to start working together and slow and steady on our study programs and getting ready for midterms. And before we knew it, we were working together a lot on extracurricular activities in AICHE and eventually in the mentorship program, which was at the peak of it all. So we eventually got to work together quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I guess going back to that time, I didn't really anticipate that I would really have been a part of AICHE as somebody working to try and make these things happen, or even a mentor for that matter. So I just didn't think that I would have enough time. But I don't know. Things happen and things don't necessarily go the way that you assume, which is good.
In this case, it was very good because what we ended up being a part of has changed me ever since I've left. In fact, it's still a motivating force for me to get out there and help out in mentorship, which is one of the main pillars of this podcast, is getting information to people that could be mentored by it and giving them some inside knowledge and some of the tips and tricks of how we got through university and getting through jobs and moving on from there. So that's a lot of this podcast, actually.
Right. I think it's a very solid subject matter. Um, I remember, I forget where I had really heard it. It may have been when I was at DVC, community college beforehand, but it may have been after I had made it to Davis. But I remember somebody telling me that, everybody at least that I went to school with, they thought UC Berkeley as an engineering school was the gold standard, and everybody usually tried to apply there and get in there, and if they didn't, they would be really sad. But I remember hearing something that the environment over there was, I mean, it sounded drastically different from anything that we had going to Davis. Who knows if that has changed or not at Davis? But it just kind of sounded like students at Berkeley were very isolated. They didn't really work together on pretty much anything, which made me very happy that I didn't get in there, because I may have taken advantage of that acceptance and gone there, and my experience with engineering school there would have been very different.
And the first question that's actually a very good segue into our first question. How the heck did you even get back into community college? Because you even have a story prior to that, which I discovered halfway into knowing you. And I go, wait a minute, this isn't your first time going to school. So how did you end up getting back into community college?
I'm a very highly educated person, Jacob. I think I've been to school a total of 11 and a half years or something. So, so,
and this is post high school.
This is post high school. Yep. Yeah, I graduated when I was 18. Like a standard person. I wasn't some sort of savant that was able to graduate at 15 or anything like that. So my senior year of high school, when I was 18, I was all ready to go to school, and I did, to San Jose State, which, it was a solid school. But I wasn't really, and I don't know how many people will ever see this, but I know that this sentiment is out there, and it probably grows the more and more people go to school right out of high school. But I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. And so I just kind of took the classes that they told you that you were supposed to, and the hope that something popped out at me and was like, okay, this would be good to do. And that never really happened. I tried to do the things that San Jose State was known for. So I tried doing computer science. And being that I'm an engineer now, probably no one will believe me, but Calculus 1 was the thing that scared me off. I couldn't do it. At least back then, I felt like I couldn't do it.
Okay, so this is back when you're like my age in university, so like 21, 20?
No, this was probably before I had turned 19, or maybe shortly after I'd turned 19. So it was right at the beginning of a 4-year program. And I forget what I went in for. I think I went in to do biology at first. And probably within the first few weeks, I had the most influential discussion with my biology advisor, because when you go in as a freshman, you're required to go and talk about your plan and try to get an idea of, okay, well, where do you want to work, and why do you want to do that, and what's your passion if you don't know where you want to work. And they try to kind of give you a focus, because biology in general is pretty broad. I took it because I had an idea in my head that I wanted to do pre-med, but in the end, that advisor kind of said, well, unless you know for sure that you're going to go to med school, you're going to have to be at the top of your class here in order to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know if I can do that. And then he's like, what else would you want to do? It's like, maybe marine biology. And he's like, okay, well, marine biologists don't make any money. And there's not that many jobs as you might think to be a marine biologist. And so he kind of talked me out of doing biology altogether. Maybe their program was impacted. I don't know. But yeah, so I stayed kind of doing the general ed classes after that. My major was not biology anymore, but I tried to take, so I took a computer programming class, like a very basic one. And I actually kind of liked that. But then when it got to the prerequisites for all this stuff, for whatever reason, I just didn't feel like I could get through it at the time. I don't know. I don't know what it was. And in retrospect, it was probably because I didn't feel desperate enough, if that's the right word. So I eventually ended up settling on psychology and behavioral science as a double major, which seems really not that different. But I ended up having a BA with both of those as my double major. So by the time I graduated, it took me a little while to figure that out. So it took me 6 years to get through that program because I was kind of bouncing around. And, I had my share of missteps along the way where I had to retake classes. And I don't know. I think everybody probably goes through something like that when they're not totally engaged in what they're going to be learning. But yeah, so then when I was 24, I graduated with that degree and I went off out into the workforce, and I ended up working at a country club, which did not pay well. And that was kind of my job out of school. And it was it was frustrating enough to open my eyes to at least be on the lookout for what else I could do. And so I spent a couple years there, and I got an opportunity to go work for a small residential construction company, because the owner of that company had heard about what my psychology focus was on, which was organizational psychology. But I didn't, at the time, I hadn't really felt like going to grad school because I didn't like it enough to really keep going. And in the end, it was probably the best thing. But he thought that organizational psychology would help him grow his business. So he brought me in as a project manager, which was not something I had ever really done before. And that job was really hard. That was really hard. And that was in 2007 that I started doing that job. And pretty much everybody that was alive knows what happened in 2008. So the entire housing market crashed, and I ended up losing my job. And I think I lost my job in February. And pretty quickly, quickly, as anyone gets on unemployment, I was on unemployment. And I was like, you know what? I am going to retrain myself because I don't like where this might go. If I just stay around trying to compete for construction jobs against people that have been doing this all their life, and they're out there looking just as much as I am. So that was what took me back to community college, being that I already had a bachelor's degree. That was really kind of the only way back in for me. And with the caveat that I had to do something very different than what I had done my first bachelor's in.
So a lot of that came from the '08 crisis and then your job history. And before you knew it, you're going, I need to do something more radically different than I've ever done before if I want to try and actually get somewhere stable, because what I was
Right.
doing before just wasn't working.
Yep. Yeah, that was I mean, it was kind of a combination of, all right, my education doesn't really specialize me for anything. And if I go out for other things that, are a stretch, but I can do them, they're just very difficult because I haven't done those jobs before. Um, there's nothing, there's nothing starting out there really makes me essential at those jobs either. And my main goal was to try to do something that it would be very hard to replace me. And in those 4 years after college the first time, I just kind of had this feeling that I could probably do better. And really, I had a desperation to really determine if I could do better or not.
But now you have had the drive that you were missing earlier. So the game changed in that regard. So now that you've got this drive to get something done that you weren't able to get done earlier, that must have been so important. And in fact, that was the same reason why I left my hometown after high school to go to Davis, because I wanted to do something so radically different than all of my other friends were doing. So I would never, ever, ever have to go back to my hometown and work somewhere and get like a $10 an hour job. That the
Right.
idea was go out from this small town, get into the university, nail it, and then go on to live a life that is completely away from that sinkhole of a town, which is what it is. Um, so
Right. I mean, a lot of it depends on where a lot of it depends on where you live and what is around you. And if nothing is around you but you yourself aren't portable, it makes it very hard for you come hell or high water, if you can't move out. I mean, not move out like move out of a house, but if you can't pack up and move out, when those trials and tribulations come around, and be flexible enough, it makes it really difficult. I
yeah,
will admit.
and in my case, the only reason why I could was there. I didn't have anything. You're 18. You're broke from the start. You're completely dependent. I was completely dependent on my parents to do this. Um, but when I heard that they said you have a ticket if you want it, it was one of those I will make every dollar count, and I hope to never ever ever fail. And then, to much to my surprise, I did fail those first 2 years quite a bit. I was doing average, and average is not what you need if you want to get in the workforce. So by the time I met you, you met me probably at the top of my motivation curve because I was so tired of losing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I remember you talking about the life in the room being different once junior year hit, and all these transfers were coming in and kicking butt, as you were saying. And yeah, I mean, going into a school kind of, I guess it would be like mid program, is definitely interesting because if I hadn't known you, I never really would have gotten a good idea of what the classroom culture, general vibe, was really like before, you really get into engineering classes, because you were taking all the gate classes
All of them.
designed to keep people out, or you just, I mean, I had to do all the same thing at community college. That was pretty much all I took when I went there. um, but none of those classes were taught by engineers. They were taught by chemists if you're taking chemistry, and physicists if you were taking physics. And yeah, I don't know. It definitely is different once you start getting taught by engineering professors. Um,
The game
yeah,
changed.
it it did change. Yeah. So I mean, it's I would say that your feelings about first 2 years in school probably are probably pretty normal, because I know I definitely went through something like that when I was going through school the first time. And I'm thankful to my parents that they did the same thing that your parents did for you, and gave the opportunity for me to go to school. But looking back on it, I was kind of like, I almost feel like maybe they wasted their money at the time. Feel like for whatever reason, it would have really helped me to just kind of not worry about going straight into school. Because at the time, I definitely didn't feel like I knew what I was doing or where I was even trying to go. And so it just kind of ended up being that it was very easy for distractions to come in. And there wasn't any real heat on me, I guess is the best way to put it. Because after I started going back to school the second time, I was doing it on my own. And I mean, you have unemployment, and that can kind of help you a little bit along the way if you're doing a retraining program. But I didn't necessarily feel like that was something I should rely on because it's temporary, and it doesn't really provide for very much flexibility. So I kind of started trying to roll on as many part-time jobs as I could. I went back to the country club that I had left, and they were pretty much like, well, we're looking for somebody to work Saturdays. I was like, okay, I will work Saturdays. And they're like, just one day a week is okay. I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. And so I worked Saturdays there for a few months, and then that grew into Saturdays and Sundays. And along the way, I just kind of ended up finding random part-time jobs at the school, working in the chemistry lab, sales internships for medical companies, which was just a lot of paperwork, taking care of disabled people. And yeah, at one point I ended up having 4 jobs. So, when I was in school the first time, I had 0 jobs. And I was doing something relatively easy, and I still struggled really hard to do anything. And then the second time I go back, I'm doing probably one of the hardest things, and I'm working 7 days a week. Pretty much school and work took about 16 to 20 hours of my day every day. And I ended up kicking a lot of butt. And that was really weird because I was kind of going back and I was like, all right, I know I had trouble with Calculus 1 last time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And I ended up being able to do it. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's amazing. All my friends that did engineering told me Calculus 2 is the hardest one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that one. And I take Calculus 2 and I pass that too. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really getting out of hand. I'm not sure what's going on here. And
killing it.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do something like mechanical engineering or civil engineering. Those seem like they might be on the easier side. And as I keep taking classes, I take chemistry, and I'm like, you know what, I really like this. I don't want to stop taking classes that are related to this. And so I decided to take one of the hardest engineering, chemical engineering, for some reason. I think along the way, probably my family thought I was a little bit insane, except I kept doing really well. And that was, that was great. So I think I spent 3 years at community college. And I was doing well enough that it inspired my parents to help me out for a year in the transition between working all the time and going to community college and going to this new school and not having a job, which was great and wasn't really something I applied for, but they kind of helped me in that little gap year. The year where I met you and a lot of the other transfers. But I didn't I definitely didn't take that help for granted because I knew what it meant to get it. I knew the value of every dollar that I had to wake up at 4 in the morning, go to work, and then just have school all day and then work at night until 10 and then do it all over again day after day after day. That 1 year that they helped meant I didn't have to actually keep doing that. And throughout that year, I was kind of like, all right, well, I'm getting close to the end. Weirdly enough, never thought I would have been there, but it's getting close to the end. And I'm like, I need to try out this networking thing because I'm pretty sure that might be the only chance that I have at finding a job. And enter AICHE for that. And I had never really been a part of any sort of school club, professional society, anything like that in the past. So it was definitely new, but I knew the second time around I had to try different things because the prior time didn't exactly work out the way that I had wanted it to. Everybody wants to go to college, boom, get their job and be fine. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But it kind of, the first time I was kind of not considering, all right, if I were going to do that, what would I study in order to be that desirable when I come out? And in general, I kind of picked something that no offense to therapists out there, I was not going to become a therapist. Therapy is great, but as a job, I was definitely not motivated to go in that direction. So that was not going to be me. And, in the end, I ended up with a degree that just kind of made me average. Sure, I could say I was educated, but it's definitely different now with engineering. It was a weird feeling to have more than one job offer when I graduated. I had never had that experience before.
And I still have yet to have that experience myself, actually. But it was great to have an offer 6 months before graduating. And
Oh yeah. I mean, even if I had had an offer waiting, I had never had that happen before either. But as you found, you've been pretty portable in what you've been able to do. Well, I won't say the name of said company because they may not advertise on your channel anymore. But said company,
they don't advertise anyway, and actually, I don't even really represent them. I just tell some experiences I had and keep it pretty general, so that way particular names don't get mentioned, and it's all right as rain.
Great. So said unnamed oil field company that you were working for, like when you were ready to, or when you were starting to ruminate about, well, all right, this is probably not where I want to stay. Would you feel like, from the outside, it seemed like you didn't have to look around for long? Do you feel like your skill set was an asset to you when you were shopping yourself around for another job?
Yeah, just not California. I noticed with California there was still some there's that one company that we can't talk about that will always say no to every person except for the top 1% of the chemical engineering class. And then there's some other ones of, you could work for the EPA or you could work for Genentech. They always love talking about Genentech, but then Genentech also is a pretty top tier company, and then that really gets to its own degree of, well, do you end up being a contractor? Or do you end up being a real employee? Because that's a big difference. But for me, I noticed a lot of opportunities were outside of California for me. And remember, I'm coming in with a GPA that's pretty average. So I wasn't expecting to get a lot of offers. And granted, I'm young at this time. I'm 21, looking for my first job out of school. Again, they're looking for some people who have a little more meat on their bones as far as experience. So I had to do something extreme again. So as I did something extreme coming out of high school, I did another extreme action to move out of the state. And
Yeah.
that was what I needed to get my resume started. And believe me, that's sometimes you just need that one, and then you start going. It has a momentum of its own, let's say.
It does, yeah. Because like you said, when you're coming out of school, really the only bar that they kind of have to hold for you is GPA, and that doesn't always really explain everything that happened in school, because you can knock it out of the park pretty well your second half, um, but your first half could drag you down. Like when I went to school the first time, that was definitely the case for me. Um, Once I started doing my major classes, I ended up doing better, but my past was always there to kind of hold me back, hold the numbers back. Um, but the world is very different when it comes to looking for a job out in the professional world when you have a psychology degree versus looking for a job out in the professional world when you have an engineering degree. Because that bar is a lot higher when you have that psychology degree, and I couldn't get to it. It's almost like you had to have a 4.2 or something to really make a difference.
Yeah, and in school, getting a 4.2 in college, I mean, that doesn't exist. I mean, you could do that in high school because you could probably crank it to 5.0 if you really wanted to go hardcore on your AP classes. But high school, I mean, you're not in professional school yet. That's still
Right.
public school. And that's for public school that's non-professional, it can only take you so far, which usually ends up being another school. Whether it being technical or not is the other story.
Right. I mean, I think it kind of reminds me of your motto going into every test. It's like, just give me something I can do. That's
You remembered, yeah,
I do.
yeah,
I mean, so that
something I can do. That was it. Because so George brought that up. He said, yeah, "So Jake, I'm hoping this is gonna be on the exam. This is gonna be on the exam. What do you think's gonna be on this? What do you hope for?" And I go, "Something I can do, George. Let's just go with that." And then after that, it's kind of funny because he doesn't always shut up, so it's funny to watch him just kind of go silent and go, "Wow, yeah, that's a succinct way to say it. Yeah, yeah, it is." So it became a meme for the next like
yeah.
year and a half.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that really resonates with me. But like looking back over everything I did at DVC, like when I was taking tests, um, that was kind of what I was subconsciously doing. I'm just like, all right, which parts of this can I do? And um, it usually ends up working pretty well.
It's a lot
Because
better strategy than just saying, "I hope it's this one particular problem I studied for because I'm not ready for these," and then, "Oh no, it's the thing I didn't study for. What do I do?" And now you're in panic mode for about 60 seconds trying to cool yourself back down until maybe you can get to work on it. And I had to get myself so humble after going through lower div, and I said, "Look, just something I can do. Let's start there because they can always throw a twist on those exams, and this is an engineering school, so clue in. They're here to humble you a bit." So,
right.
and
And I mean,
that was what it was the whole time for me.
yeah. I mean, who knew that would really continue to be a good metaphor for what you should kind of look for in life after school? Because after you find that one job that you can do coming out, your GPA doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you went out to that job and you did the best you could, and you learned a lot, and you got stuff out of it, and then you can pretty much move on to the next one, and they won't really care about what your grades were.
It's a wonderful thing because the GPA for so long for me was one of those burdens that I felt like I could never get good enough. And I thought it would always be that adversary that would be stopping me from opportunity, which to me was very frightening as a very motivated 21-year-old. because in high school it was so different. I mean, if you just tried and you just put your soul into it and that's all you did, let alone strategies and being able to be figuring out a, the smart way to do it, let's say. That's all
Yeah.
you had to do in high school, just try. And then when I went to not only a different city where people were just smarter in general, but chemical engineering, the STEM fields in a college environment, you can't just put your soul into it and just brute force it. It doesn't work. You have to come up with strategies. You have to come up with different ways to attack the problem than just, if I just try hard enough, I'll get over it. That doesn't work. And it took me a long time to get myself out of that habit because people weren't exactly telling me, Jacob, you can't just brute force it. There wasn't someone in my corner until about sophomore year when people were saying, you could probably learn it this way. This would be easier. And then that changed my whole perspective on I need to be more strategic about how I study. This isn't working, which is something that Daniel and I brought up on the last podcast. He was talking about how he saw a lot of us non-transfer students not even reading the textbooks. We were just doing the lecture notes and doing the homework, going over the problems in the lecture notes, and maybe finding them in the book if we needed more info, but never reading the textbook page to page, cover to cover. And that was a big thing that I noticed a lot of transfer students had to get over because they were used to, if I just read enough and I do all the homework problems and I'm able to get through all this, things will be fine and I'll ace the exam. Not true. We had to use different tactics. And that makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, that's not really your standard education experience once you get into junior year of college.
Right. Yeah, I think, let's see. Yeah, I think I was probably used to reading the book a lot. But for the most part, it would mainly be for examples and just trying to figure out how they do examples. But I guess I did one of the things I noticed when I came in, and you can probably tell me if this was true because it was just my impression. Um, but it seemed like there were probably maybe a prevailing attitude in the way that people studied together from freshman sophomore year, where it was just kind of like one person, or I mean, at some point, one person would come up with an answer, and then that answer would kind of get distributed out. It was more, hey, did you solve the problem? And it's either yes or no. And if it's no, then they're not interested in talking to you. If it's yes, then they're like, okay, let me see what you did. But and I did kind of notice that when I was in community college as well. That was kind of the attitude that a lot of people took because they were very interested in getting done quickly. And at the time I could definitely understand why you would want to get done quickly because I had 4 jobs. Getting done quickly would have been nice. I could have taken a nap or something. Um, but it was almost like the concepts kind of got a little lost, which was nice coming to, and by the time I left, that attitude was not as forceful. There were maybe 2 camps at that point when I was finishing up my quote unquote sophomore year. There was the camp of the people that were just interested in you if you had the answer, and then the people that were interested in learning how you got the answer because the answer is not important. If you get 90% of the problem done and you screw up the answer, you get 90% of the credit, which is still good. That was definitely different for me taking tests because I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm going to get the right answer at the end. Like multiple choice questions, you have to get the right one. There's no partial credit. But then if you learn the steps to get there, you do get a lot of credit on the test. And that was different.
Yeah, it's more about the method. And once you have the method, as other problems come up, it's way more useful in a team environment, because now you can actually say, well, here are some concepts we learned from the prior lesson, but they're being used in a different method. But if I put these two methods together, we can actually solve this problem. And then we'd show around and say, oh, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. But wait, if we do this assumption and we let this boundary condition fall, we can actually solve this. And you'd see people really light up with that. Oh, okay, well, we can at least solve part of it today. So here's a simple version. And sure enough, the homework would be not the simple version, it'd be the complex version. But the next day, we may have learned something else of, oh, here's this function that would plug into this boundary condition. Now we can add this to our methods we were learning before. And it was just summation. You put them together. And it wasn't that bad. But always the lead up to getting those problems solved, whether it be partial differential equations, which we did way too many of them, or just a design problem where you need to find out a particular distillation column concentration, and you need to use your software. Either way, you needed to find some kind of method to justify your answer. And that really got to be the case when we were a team in our design class. So the method needed to be sound enough where you could present it and say, yeah, these numbers make sense. We're not just tooting your horn here. We're not giving you a simple answer. We're giving you a reasonable method. So your money's probably going to go where it should, which really is a lot of what we're trying to do in engineering. You're trying to give a justification for everything you're doing with some kind of data and some kind of method. And if you don't have data, I mean, fine, you got to go find out, and maybe you got to experiment first. You might need to shoot from the hip a little bit, which we certainly did.
Right.
But once you have some data and you've been able to get past the experimental phase, you could use your engineering degree a lot more than just shooting from the hip. And here's your quick answer that we had only 24 hours to give you for, let's say, the design of a methanol plant.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we had done all of that background work. If you think about it, with no actual understanding of how a methanol or a chemical plant in general would work. So, we've never actually worked with any of this stuff out in the field. So, if I had to go back and do it again, I feel like it would be a very different experience. Even though I have never worked in a methanol plant, I've at least worked in plants where I have seen and worked with pump curves and whatever else that we only saw in books when we were there. I don't know. It's like a backwards solving problem, kind of.
Reverse engineering is probably where a lot of my development in engineering work has been in the last 5, 6 years. It's been less on trying to reinvent the wheel and come up with a design for a plant, and more, here's a process that we're giving you, or here's a new process that someone just tried to design. Do what you need to do to make it function if it's not working. And you take the parts that did work from other processes and see if they would fit in. And if not, see if you can modify it so it would fit in. And that's usually where the mistakes happen, by the way, because you might be shooting from the hip a little too much. And a lot of that can come from, oh, my vent path isn't where I thought it was going to be. My pressure curve I thought was going to be the same, but it's actually different. The piping I thought would be the same, but it's not. The footage could be changed. A lot of things can change that makes your initial design modification just completely fall on its head. So
Right.
those pitfalls are something to keep in mind, which we found out just trying to design a plant without even knowing any of the internals.
Yep, it's true. I mean, a lot of times you can kind of. I mean, I've run into people on projects since I've been out of school, and the design has come prior to implementation, and we ended up having pumps that were a little underpowered, but not by much. Some of the process people that were on site, they were like, yeah, I was pretty skeptical that these would even work. But somewhere, someone had done the calculation, because you need calculations before you go and buy something. Um,
You need justification. And that's a
I guess,
lot of what we were doing in our initial designs. We were taking pieces that worked, data that we were able to figure out on our software, and try and come up with something that would look believable. And it's not trying to lie. In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're trying to give as much truth to what we're going to buy as possible. Um,
right.
because
And I mean, a lot of that would tell you, like, if you ended up being able to do the process, but you have to have some sort of tower that's like, I don't know, 200 feet taller than the standard, that's going to be really expensive. And it'll probably show you that, okay, maybe for the amount of money we want to spend, this is not going to work.
yeah, instead of making the Tower of Babel, can we just make like three more distillation columns in parallel? Can we do that? Same size. It'd be great.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to
Yeah.
worry about putting. What was the joke? You need to put that. You need to budget a light on the top of your distillation tower so that way planes wouldn't run into it.
Yeah, that's important.
It is.
Helicopters, yeah, you don't want anything hitting it.
So now that we've been talking about design and we've been dialoguing a lot about some of our design issues, what before we get into mentorship, what do you think makes the team function great versus a team that functions average to below average?
Um, hmm.
So rephrase that, it would be what qualities cultivate a team environment to be great, and what made our senior design team function well.
Um, so I think there's probably two that I would say really stick out, even in a working environment. Um, One of them is, if everybody on the team is good at listening, that's a plus, a big plus. But it doesn't necessarily mean anything without the second one, which, if people are easily offended, that would make it much more difficult, because I know that there are people out there, they spend a lot of time on an idea, and I've had this feeling before at work, um, where really the constraints of what I was working with didn't allow me to do what I wanted to do, and it's been so much time on, I felt, to do it, and so my idea ended up being steaming pile. Um, so like, if you're working in a team environment, and I felt like it, at least with our senior design team, you being there, I don't feel like any of the four of us ever really felt offended that our ideas either fell apart on their own, or someone challenged us and said, I don't think that's going to work. Um, but imagine how difficult that would have been if even one of us would kind of just crumble at the thought of someone saying no to their idea. That would have been a lot more complicated.
And that's
And
all it takes. You get one
right,
person like that, the whole team dynamic turns into one camp into two. And now you have to fight that for the rest of the design course instead of just focusing on the one challenge by itself, which is hard enough, which is design the plant.
right. And there's, I don't know, I would say the easily offended thing may happen if someone's used to being the smartest person in the room all the time, and they really have never felt the necessity for being challenged. Um, but out in the working world, that is not a characteristic that you can have if you're going to keep your job, if you're going to ever be promoted, or if anyone's going to have anything nice to say about working with you. So, you know, yeah.
So what other teamwork aspects made it good? I wanted to say one more thing about that. As far as our team, not only didn't get offended on differing ideas and we could listen, but there was a real uh, balance of powers, let's say. So not everyone was gifted at the exact same thing.
Right.
So
I think that's good. Um, I think that almost would have been impossible if any one of us wanted to get good at everything, because there's just not enough time. When you have a deadline, it goes back to the thing of just give me something I can do to help. And any number of those things is pushing everyone's goal closer and closer to the finish line. And ultimately, that's where you all want to be. Um, I don't know that there's. Yeah, I think we had a pretty good separation of things that we wanted to contribute, um, and there wasn't really a whole lot of overlap. Um, we could have just gotten really lucky in getting the group makeup that we did, and I think we did. Um, yeah, because we could have gotten a group where no one was very good with base equations. That would have been really difficult.
oh sure, I mean, and if we didn't have our other compatriots in economics and coding, that would have made it a lot harder because I would have had to spend a lot less time on the design, which I was surprised, by the way. You guys let me design the plant. I thought I was really surprised I was in the driver's seat on that one. I
No,
was I was really shocked. I was glad to do it, but I was going, okay, I gotta get Aspen down. I cannot ignore it this quarter. This has to be me, and
right.
that pushed me in a very positive way, I think. And a lot of it didn't manifest until the end. The last 2 weeks are where I really started to see it shine. And it was, man, it was at the nick of time, too. The nick of
Yeah,
time, we finally got to redesign everything to where it should be. And it was a relief because for about 75% of that quarter, I thought you guys made a big mistake and let me lead this software part of it. But much chagrin, that's not the case. In fact, it worked out for the best.
well, we showed you, Jacob.
You
Take
did.
that.
I, I'll admit, you did.
Yeah, I think as time went on, I would have liked to know more about the plant design stuff, from the Aspen's perspective, but you know, we all had parts that we could do. I definitely still had time constraints from work, but I tried to get through that as much as I possibly could. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe being partially busy can kind of help you prioritize a little more. If I had had more time, maybe I just would have been obsessing about getting good at all parts, and then the part that I was really supposed to be focusing on would have suffered a little bit.
Gotta say, that explains a lot with a lot of us in college. We, our spare time really just kept going into extracurriculars or work or school or the mentorship family. It always went somewhere. And I think because it always went somewhere, there was this drive that you could not ignore unless you had, let's say, okay, you're on winter break. Ah, oh, okay, this is where we get to do nothing for 2 weeks straight. No calls, no nothing. But a lot of it came from the fact that there wasn't time to screw up. I guess that's
Yeah.
one way to put it. Well, we messed up though. That's the thing. But it was that mindset of we don't have time to mess up. We have time to get this done for what we can do today and then move on. And that
Yeah.
was to me a big motivator. It's just you're in this far. Don't quit. And we had each other that really motivated each other to not quit no matter what day it was. And every day, at least one of us had that I wish I wasn't here. I kind of don't want to do this right now. But then somebody, which is the interesting part, it didn't always come from one person. This came from everybody. That as much as we don't want to do this right now, this is what we got to do. And then once we had the mission straight, it wasn't about dragging your feet anymore. It was just, let's get this done. And
Right.
that there's so many teams I've been on where it's just not like that. Oh, I'm going to wait till the next day, or nah, I'm going to bypass them using this piece of paperwork. Very anti-team, actually. And this is one of the
Oh,
first times where four people had equal authority to counterbalance each other, but also push. And it wasn't just about, well, let's not do anything. Let's see if we can find a way to push through. And if we can't push through, let's take our best design and roll from it.
yeah. Yeah, I think that was a pretty positive thing as well, being able to be with three other pretty motivated people. Um, yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of very, very late nights. Oh man.
I'll never forget the last one. The very last day where you got all these Facebook photos of everyone's designs. Look, 200 pages of work finally done. Like taking side
Oh,
shots to show the thickness of all the papers.
yeah. Well, that might have been the day that I fell asleep while talking on the couch with you guys about the project. But then I woke up. It's not often you get to fall asleep mid-sentence.
Yeah, and I think that was at Rose's place, if
Yeah,
I'm not
it
mistaken.
was. Yep, it was.
That was a lot of work. And there was so much invested in it that I didn't question all the time, why should we be doing this? It was more of, we need to get this done so eventually we never have to be here anymore, and we get our degree, we get to go where we need to go, we get to go to work and put this behind us. There was this real drive that we need to put this behind us. Um, and I can't really feel that way now in the same way, which is kind of a bummer in terms of motivation. But I don't think you need to necessarily have that to make a team continue like that. Um, it was a great environmental motivator, let's say, but I think there's something else that we need to have internally that would be more healthy than that. Because if you're always in an action film for 30 years of your life, um, that
Right.
that seems to take away. Um,
Yeah, the urgency kind of ends up going away when there's not an immediate. I mean, what did we have? Oh, 3 months, really, for that?
that's it. Three
Um,
months.
yeah, if you have your team and you're mainly working day to day in a plant, then I guess the whole perspective on why people have team building exercises kind of starts to come into play. Like when you get to step back and actually look at it and be like, okay, this is an attempt to keep us motivated. Of course, it's not really something I want to do because it feels maybe dumb or something. I don't, some team building exercises can be interesting on the absurd side, perhaps. Um, but it's all in the end, it's probably all just in good fun, trying to get people to uh, step outside a little bit and maybe do the exercise that we just did. I mean, I can't. I guess I don't know. In the end, my job ended up probably being probably not being the best example of what I just talked about because by and large, I work on projects that really do have deadlines, and then those projects are indeed over. Um, so in a sense, sometimes I still do feel that kind of motivation. Um, I mean, I've stayed at work until 11:30 a few times when things just wouldn't work, and then come back at 7. Uh, thankfully, I don't have that happen a lot, but it takes me back. Except most of the time, I'm there sitting by myself trying to finish it.
It's so different
For
by yourself. The
yeah,
environmental factor of being by yourself is no long it's more of a negative now. The only positive is maybe you don't have someone extremely annoying sitting next to you, you know, making your life hell. Uh, that would
yeah,
be the one positive thing of working by myself. And that's actually one reason why I actually don't mind nights, um, because I know of how much tyranny I don't have to deal with. Um, if Now, granted, on days you can have a lot more help. That's the thing. So there's a flip side. Yeah, I could have more help, but how much tyranny do I have to have with it? Or do I just want to flip the table on its head and just limit the personnel and just find the happy medium now that I don't have to worry about fending off so much people trying to waste my time or trying to burden me with a new project or something? So
right.
there's something to be said there too. Um, what qualities did you see in the teams that didn't do so well? I'm curious what you think on that.
Um, let's see. I would say that I probably noticed teams that had people that were, or people from experience that I knew were kind of in the mindset of just being worried about the answer, getting all the answers right. Um, I think those groups seem to have kind of a hard time with cohesion, um, because even even in our project, and I even was probably guilty of this when our project started, was that I did want our end answer to be correct. But in doing the project, kind of realized that there was no real answer at the end. Not even the professors knew what the right answer was. Um, it was all a matter of what kind of simulation could we come up with that worked. And there's not one answer for that. There are probably a collection of answers, and they all have certain characteristics about them, but they aren't identical to each other. And that kind of is like building a plant, because unless the same people are building the plant each time and they strictly decide this plant is going to be exactly like the last plant because it's going to be making the same thing and the same quantity and all of that, we can just copy and paste the same thing over. um, and like you said before, a lot of our jobs is probably reverse engineering and then re-engineering something just a little tiny bit different for what you need at the time, but you need to make sure that it works. Um,
A lot of mistakes can happen with the reverse engineering, but it's
right.
unfortunately that's where a lot of it comes down to. If you don't have time to reinvent the wheel, the next best option is to reverse engineer something that does work and
Mm-hmm.
find a way to shoehorn it in if you have to. Um, and if you can spare the try and remove a lot of problems that can come along the way. For example, just having a good supply chain for getting your parts, or having some experienced personnel install the equipment, or uh, having some similar people that have worked together before build the next plant. That helps because now you don't
Right.
have like the Star Wars problem where it's like a relay race instead of one person being directing 6 movies. Now you got 3 directors and 3 movies. So
Right. Yeah. So I think you can get tripped up if you're thinking about the end result, because really the only thing that's going to get you to the end is all the stuff in between. And I think with us struggling, well, let's see. They kind of rolled the project out in stages a little bit. So we weren't even able to really go straight to the end from the beginning. But I have a feeling that I probably would have wanted to go straight to the end, and probably was chomping on the bit a little bit at the beginning of the quarter. Be like, just let's start working on the end thing. I want to see what this looks like.
well,
I
it's
want to.
funny that you said that because you're the R&D guy. From what I remember, you were the guy that
Right.
were just getting the bare bones finished. But nonetheless, here you are. Well, hey, where's the final pump that's pumping the methanol at a million gallons a day or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's probably that because they were kind of, um, those people might have been a little more at risk of kind of not realizing where they were at any. And every time that they had to come back to the task, it was like they were starting from the very beginning, because they weren't focused in the right place. Um, and then maybe, focus. I mean, I remember going to college the first time and moving away from home. It is definitely hard to stay focused because you're usually used to having your parents around or a parent around at any given time. And if you're supposed to be doing something, they'll remind you. And then you move out all of a sudden, uh, maybe to a place that all of a sudden has all this other stuff to do that's not important. It's easy to get distracted, and it's kind of easy to keep those distractions throughout your entire stay in college. Um, for me, coming back, I don't really think it was me being 8 to 10 years older than everybody I was sharing classes with that helped me steer away from that, because I don't think age doesn't really provide a guarantee that you won't be distracted by said things. Um, but I definitely felt like I was, one, desperate, and two, kind of at the end of whatever rope I felt I was on. And if this didn't work, there wasn't not going to be a third do-over. So I better just knock it off and do my stuff. And boy, am I glad eventually college ended, because I don't think I could have kept that up for longer than 5 years. That was very exhausting.
Well, it was a war. I mean, people don't always see it that way. Some people think university's great, and for those top people, they can have that. But for most of us, and this is how I thought it was a flat out war. It was always something going on. There was always another fight. It was continuous, and it engulfed whatever social life I did. I mean, heck, the reason why I got into AICHE is because that's where half my friends were. And okay, well, we're going to be talking about school there too. Yeah, well, it's convenient. Fair enough. It's convenient to still talk about things there. And so we were never really set the work life balance thing. It just, we knew it wasn't going to exist to the level it would after. And gee, the work life balance now in comparison to what I had back then, if someone told me, Jake, you're going to go and you're going to work 36 to 48 hours a week, but you got to wait 5 years to do it. If someone told me that at 18, I would have been like, you're kidding. Right now I'm working like 50 to 55, and it's probably leaning on 60 as I get closer to what I'm doing. And it feels like it's never really leaving me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a bizarre feeling that I mean, the second time around, um, it really kind of shifted my perspective on a lot of things, because even now I find it hard to take a vacation, because I felt like I had to be in this survival mode for, well, pretty much 7 days a week. And I mean, I literally, with all the jobs that I had, was working every day, um, with the exception of 1 year right in the middle. But then I decided that I was too bored and decided to go get a job at Genentech, where I had to work on the weekends again. So, for some reason, I just can't stay away. It's hard on the outside, Jacob. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. But it's also at that time, I mean, if you were a fourth year or a third year working as some kind of co-op or an internship, you're already in the game. So
Right.
people will have a respect for that. And
Yeah.
so it's not like, well, oh, Matt's got to go to Genentech. It's no, that's good. He's getting himself out into the real world. That probably helped quite a bit when you come back to academia, because then you really got to balance the two out. Versus for me, I was in academia mode virtually the whole time, except for one part-time job in between sophomore and junior year. Other than that, I was flat out extracurriculars and academia 100%. So
Yeah.
it totally different. And once academia ended, it was I too was relieved because wars are exhausting. After 4 years of that, I mean, it was you can almost breathe a different way once it's over, because there you go. Here's your degree. There's the job that you sought after within the last few months. That's now in your grasp. You're gonna go get it. Oh, and a lot of your friends are gonna go all over the place because well, our missions are now changing to a more individual one,
Right. Yeah.
which is kind of
I
sad. That actually was probably one of the things that you could never put a price on was the teamwork aspect that we were able to get. And just as we really got a functional group, uh,
right.
that's when okay, it's time for everyone to go on their own journey and their own destinies. And we were all well, so be it. Fortunately, I had 5 people come with me into the oil fields as well. One of them who actually was in my city. So the adventure continued for some time until I moved back to California.
Yeah, I mean, even if you end up working at the same company, not necessarily far from where you went to school, um, you probably ended up seeing more of the person. I'm assuming it was Sean, right, that went up with you.
Oh no, it was Chris.
Oh yeah, yeah, Chris.
Yeah,
So
Big
you
Chris,
probably,
Chris B.
yeah, you probably saw Chris more often than likely two people that went to work at Genentech at the same time. Because even though your buildings are close together on a campus, or I mean, maybe you don't end up working in the same building, you may never see that person.
And with Chris, I didn't really see him very often because since we were on 2 different crews. But when we went to operation school together, I saw him a lot. For a
Yeah,
month, I was seeing him every day. So
yeah.
we were in 2 different classes, and I was 1 month ahead of him, telling him about all the horrible things that had fallen upon our operations school. And for that reason, which I talked about in different streams, we just had an incredible turnover rate that made it really stressful. And our professor changed halfway through. We had people that were just getting either fired or let go, or they had to retake the operations school left and right. And it was at the end when things really hit home, and there were only 4 of us out of the 12 that made it. And
Wow.
and
Yeah.
these are all people who have university degrees to begin with in engineering. So that was a big wait. What did I sign up for? What is this? Uh, it was it was so different. I'm glad I did it though. Looking back, that's been a very uh, valuable experience, even though it almost broke me. Uh, and I actually
Yeah.
had a lot of resentment that I had to get over from that, especially that first year. Man, that first year, I was so mad at at how what all the events that had taken place. Um,
Yeah. You definitely can't really. I mean, I think a lot of recruiters, when you're looking for jobs, they can pretty much tell you with fairly good accuracy what will happen when you go and work for them at the beginning. Um, but maybe they conveniently leave those other parts out because it kind of sounds like an environment where it was like, well, we want you to move up or we want you to wash out.
you're not wrong. That's very them. And now upstream oil though, they're used to people moving on, so they have no problem up in the ante to make sure they
Yeah,
get the candidates that are gonna be rock hard and just get after it. And that's
right.
fine. It's just it wears on you. And it wore on you in a different way than it did in university. University, I didn't. By the time we got into our major classes, we really started to get something that was so valuable that you can't put a price on, which is the teamwork concept. that we had in our friend group and in our design groups. Now, over here, now we had part of that. Part of it was now I've got these new friends in the oil that were all over the place, but we had something that we both valued, which was we need to move up or we're going to get washed out, and we don't want to wash out yet, but we may need to change jobs. Okay. So at least today, let's get this done. And we had that going, but as far as life mission, radically different. And that wasn't, that kind of changed the teamwork environment. But I was very happy to work with some of them that I did. Claude and Margo being two of them, and Nick. If it weren't for those folk, which all of them made it, I wouldn't have made it either. So,
Yeah. And I remember some of your, or referencing some of your stories that, every once in a while you'd have time to call me in my time zone when you were out there. It kind of sounded like it was a bit of a repeating cycle, at least working for that specific company, because they would gather all the people from wherever into this one spot, have the operation school setting, and then probably, and this is just a guess, but I kind of remember some of your classmates from that. After that, they weren't going back to work where they were before. They were shipped off to somewhere else where they were needed. Was that correct?
100%. I mean, you've got people that are coming back from operations school going, yeah, so we may need you to go over to Rock Springs over in the Wyoming, Colorado area. We may need you to go to Montana. We're thinking about moving you over to a different city around North Dakota. Way common back then. And then we had some people that once after I left were talking about going to Saudi Aramco, of all places, which is, for those who don't know, Saudi Arabia's kingship oil company. So
I believe, and I'm not sure if this is still correct, but I think sometime at the end of last year, they eclipsed and took the top spot at the most valuable company in the world.
I won't be surprised. I've got a hat that says Gawar Gas Operations, and it's one of the biggest oil areas in the world.
Yeah, they are big, but I think that kind of does it. It's disheartening when you come up during hard times with a good crew that you feel like you have positive teamwork experience with, and then just to have that kind of broken up because you ended up in your class being the top performers and you weren't all needed in the same place. So it's kind of like, well, you guys worked well together. Now you have to go off to whatever opportunities are waiting for you. But
granted, for Claude and for Nick, they went back to their areas, and Margo and I did too. But it was what followed 3 months later. We saw the writing on the wall in school, but for a lot of us, we're looking at what happened. And Claude stayed in for a long time. He may even still be in it now. The last I remember, he was still in it in 2018. So that's he really knocked it out of the park. He kept going. He actually ended up being a mentor figure in the Southwest, so Arizona, New Mexico area in frac. Yeah. But what ended up happening with Margo and myself, we both looked at it with the writing on the wall, and we had a similar idea of, we need to find the heck out of here. And I got out first, and she did the furlough thing for 6 months and then got out after that. And it was the smart move for her because she was already dating somebody who was already in the company as well. And it was a big win for them because then they got out together and they got to have a normal life after that. So,
yeah.
And that's pretty slick because, well, the idea was we weren't going to stay there forever.
Right.
Yeah, Margo and I were not the same team you, Rose and Stephanie were, though. Not even close. I mean, you took two people on opposite ends of the political spectrum, spiritual spectrum, different work attitudes, but for some reason we could work together because of the mission, and we looked out for one another anyway. And She
Yeah.
actually looked out for me a lot more than I've had any other atheist look out at for me. So that says a lot, actually, about her character, regardless of what we believed. At least in those moments, I saw a lot of her more redeeming characteristics when she was good. And granted, I saw some of the other things too, but as far as when we were a team, I really got to see her redeeming characteristics shine from time to time. And I guess I did too because we just looked out for each other. And I think that's something a lot of teams nowadays just could care less for. It's more about just take care of yourself, and then if everyone else can't take care of them, then tough cookies. That's on them, um, which
Well,
is sad because I kind of miss how it was prior.
right. I mean that kind of goes back to something I said at the beginning where, oh man, it just slipped out of my head. But
That's fine.
it's it's a kind of thing where if you end up working on your own and you feel like that's how you work best, um, more than likely it's going to be very hard to work with someone like that in a team. And I doubt very much that if people um, if people have that kind of chip there that doesn't really let them um, value their teammates, then they're kind of not doing themselves any favors because, in general, when you work as a part of a team in a company, people are coming to you to ask your opinion of the other people in your team, and that dictates how those people are viewed as valuable, uh, not valuable, or invaluable. Um, and just as a money basis, um, that can cost you money. And
Yeah, there's a financial aspect that people really don't understand. But also, and we were going to talk about this last Wednesday, but we're going to move that stream forward to next Wednesday. We were going to talk about some of the things that we've been noticing in modern day, particularly in the last decade, um, about cultural shifts and the high rise of the individuality as the sole value in someone's life as opposed to the group, which is how most of humanity has survived. It's more been about, I will do this for the group because if the group dies, I die.
right,
And that's becoming less and less relevant. And the implications for that is changing the way teamwork is going around. And granted, there's environmental stuff too. And I mean, the work environment itself, that could have been set years ago, independent of the culture at large. Maybe it was just a bad company that just didn't value people, and it just no one really took the horns on that and led it towards giving value to their employees. Um, but
right. I think you probably saw that motif at play, um, and it could be that's kind of their model when it comes to how they orchestrate things out in oil fields because they don't need to do it any other way. Um, they know that maybe there's people hardcore enough that'll work themselves to the bone because they know that they're getting good money,
which
and they
they
don't
are.
care. Yeah, yeah, and they don't care about anything else. Um, but there's other types of companies out there, and it's good that you saw some writing on the wall and that encouraged you to go try another company, because it's important to listen. It's important to listen to cues like that. I think otherwise you really end up being stuck somewhere that makes you unhappy for a very long time. Um, yeah,
And we've all seen it. I mean, in oil, I saw it with some folk that were getting paid just enough where they were happy with it, but they were miserable because they knew I'm just work. All I'm doing is this is money for me, and then up right 80% of it's going to my family. Up well, then the other 20 goes to something else, and before you know it, that's their life, and now it's all about money instead of it. I prefer this job. My family appreciates it. This is something I can do. I have a team environment here that I like, even though it's not perfect. Those were the
Right.
answers I was hearing a lot of the time. Granted, there are plenty of frac crews, and this is hope for people who want to do it. You can get some real fired up crews that, dude, we've been running for 9 months. It's been awesome. I'm not let go. I had friends of mine let go from the last recession that still haven't found work in the same way they did before, and they're working this crap job. And I'm telling them about this position. I want to get them in because we got a good crew. So there was, in fairness, the other side of the continuum, you also had that kind of
Oh yeah.
operations crew, which was really cool because I got to see some of them. But before I knew it, I'd been moved to another crew, and before it wouldn't be the same environment. So I didn't always get to spend a lot of time with those kind of crews, but they exist. They're at least 30%, which is good. So chances
Yeah,
are
no
you'll get
doubt.
like 1 out of 3 crews are actually happy with where they're at as long as they have something to do.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that probably your former company has a they are looking for people that are exactly like that because they love what they do in however they end up doing it. And they're just looking for those fired up people by using fire to get rid of the other ones, I guess. Um,
It works too well. You said that before, and it works too well to make it. Well, let's make it a little easier on people. We don't have to be so hard. That's not the oil field. That's not the environment. You need to
but
utilize the environment to weed the weak out and increase the people who are strong. It's a very evolutionary mindset, but nonetheless, the social Darwinism thing that happens there, and
mhm.
and even if you try to make the oil field a little softer, it just doesn't make sense. You're in the Midwest where the weather can change on you in 2 days. It could be muddy one day and snowing the next day, and you might be raining the next day, and then you got mud again. I mean, and you're dealing with these clients who are just making oodles of money, and they're working real hard. You just can't. It's so hard to make sense of. Well, we're only going to make them work 60-hour weeks. No, you're not. That's not going to motivate people. So I think they made the right choice. They had to. They saw the environment. They said we need to make people who are strong for it, not
Right.
people who can't handle it. Otherwise, we're just going to have a turnover rate that is even bigger than the one we have now. So it's either bad or worse. So they picked bad,
Right.
and bad at least gets them to keep some people. So yeah,
Yeah,
the
I kind
oil
of
environment is it's hard to make it softer for people to live there comfortably.
right. I kind of, I mean, granted, it's completely different, but I kind of see working in computer programming much the same way. Not that you're stuck out in the elements with snow and mud, but they just want to strain your brain as much as they possibly can and get squeeze all the juices out of it while they can. And a lot of people don't like to work that way. And luckily, you're not assigned to a job, so you can definitely look for something else and and find a pace that works for you. I don't know, but people in computer programming, they get paid a lot of money. Same as working in oil. The hours might be the same um, depending on where a project is, but they at least want to compensate you for hard work, and that's good. At least it's not you give us a ton of hard work and we'll give you not so much.
Yeah, and it's for what I was making for just a first time job. The amount of money I was making was not the best, but the fact that they paid your room and board for
Oh,
for
yeah.
a lot of it. And this is kind of like the military. I mean, people forget if your room and board and ammunition are covered for, that's a lot of expenses that are already just written off. That's wonderful. That liberates you. Housing's the biggest. Housing's the biggest in any budget. That's going to be your number one. So
Right.
having that taken care of, and food. I mean, that's for me. That's my number 3 expense. uh, at it per year. So having most of food taken care of, so like 75%, that's liberating. You can do something with that. Um, so in my case, I didn't have a house, so I lived at the man camps and stuff for a few months, and man, I was able to pay off my car really quick, and I finally got some savings for once, and it was I could give back. That was another thing. I felt like I was taking for so much of my life, and I couldn't give back at all, and now I could. Um,
Yeah.
so it was really empowering. So for a first time job, I actually recommend it. If you want to do an adventure and you really want to see what the raw world is like, go for it. Um, but don't think it's going to be this 40-hour a week, just kind of live mediocre life. It's not a mediocre life. So understand it's going to be a time limit. So when your time's up, get the heck out so you can go back to living like a normal human being again, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to start out somewhere, that's a great way to just see the raw industry, raw reality, harsh environments. And then when you do something mediocre, you get a gratitude that you didn't have before, which I now possess, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one skill that people that people should always remember to keep honing is just being able to figure out, well, maybe it's all going back to this whole just give me something I can do thing, but it's almost like give me something that I'm gonna do later, because as you found, you kind of went up into an ops school, which not everybody got to go through. But the people that made it through that, likely if you had stayed there, you would have been then the leaders 10 years down the road or something, if you made it that long. And your job would be vastly different at that point.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I mean, your field
yeah.
days are usually about 5 years. And then after that, they either find a way to get you to move up and
Hmm.
take the pay cut and do a normal job so you're not working as many hours. Or they'll do, unfortunately, what happened to not one, but two of our friends, and they let them go.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, even those people that got let go, as long as you're kind of thinking, what am I doing? You're still building onto yourself. Like, all right, if I got like, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that thinks about this all the time, but um, I'm always paranoid about losing my job because it's happened to me before. And I know in the right circumstances, it can be incredibly difficult to get back on your feet, to get anything really back to where you were you um, before you lost your footing. It
No,
can be
I'm right
hard.
there with you because ever since what happened to me in 2015, where we saw the writing on the wall, man, it can happen before you know it. And
Right.
it taking precautions and having the like 6 months worth of savings ready to rock and roll at any given time, that's like a modern day problem, but it's also a practical thing just to
Mhm.
do in the event something happens you didn't expect. You're ready to drop that. You can just focus on getting a new job. You don't have to worry about not having it. It is there because you were thoughtful and you didn't blow all your money on traveling and uh, living a ludicrous lifestyle. You decided, nah, just in case, because life's unpredictable sometimes. Here is my contingency fund.
Right. Well, it's also kind of not being passive at work. I think no matter where you have to go, um, and I had to go do something extreme in order to get above where I was before, but you kind of always want people to see, all right, I'm going to be better tomorrow than I am today, and I'm better today than I was yesterday. And I think
Someone's
if
reading Jordan Peterson. Rule 4.
oh, oh okay.
That's yeah.
I'd
That's a
like to
great
say
book.
that was my idea, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would say a lot of our ideas aren't our ideas, but I would say that you have some value and you own the idea in ways that others don't. So you at least own the idea.
Yeah, perhaps. But I think when you're looking for jobs, people want to see that, and people won't see that if you don't really make that into something that you do, because you can't fake it. Um,
Fake what exactly?
uh, Fake having the attitude that whatever you're going to do at work, it's going to make you a stronger candidate. It's going to make you a stronger employee, and just kind of always looking to that, because really, whether it's at the company you're at now or later, that is your security. It's not necessarily the money you have in the bank, but it's the attitude that you take with you, that my job isn't to make money. My job is to make myself better so that I can be desirable no matter where I work.
That is a you need to do that. And I'm glad you're saying that because so many people think that they're completely safe. And all it takes is one, like what happened to you in '08, where the bottom comes out, and now what do you do now? And if you weren't making yourself better, chances are you're letting yourself become weaker. And
Mm-hmm.
you got to do something to combat that. Life is oxidizing. It's it, you're the natural state of things is breaking down, and the world is passing away, and it takes a resharpening. And if you're not doing it that at work, and that's such a great place to do it. You're already getting paid to do some kind of task, so why not make yourself sharper that way? It's aiming for a higher good than, well, I'm only going to get this done today, and I'm going to be mediocre today. It's my Friday. I hear that a lot. It's my Friday. Um, well, it's my Monday. I'm still getting myself fired up. I didn't notice how bad those excuses were in a team environment until I started using it a couple months ago as an excuse, and I shocked myself into, wow, I actually did less. These are not trivial things we say to each other. Our words matter.
Oh, yeah.
So we've actually gone for I think almost 2 hours here, Matt. So we
Wow.
focus mostly on teamwork and our backgrounds, and it's been really fun
Great.
catching up with the teamwork because this is interesting. We got to catch up while talking about some of our good and bad teamwork experiences and things to be worried about in industry, and things to strive for in industry too. I wanted to give you
Nice.
the floor for anything else you wanted to add to everything we've said.
Um, well, I know when you sent me some of the list of stuff you wanted to talk about, there was a bunch of mentorship stuff there. Um,
Yeah, that's like 5 questions. We can that
yeah,
can
I mean, we can pick it up again on another episode if you want to.
that would
Um,
be awesome, and that would also save us a lot of time. So,
that's
um,
true. Plus, this one's pretty well focused on on a smaller set of topics, so maybe that's not so bad.
it's not, and we actually got to steer it in a way that was a lot more on the teamwork and
Mhm.
just being able to put our experiences from life in it. It was more like a life slash teamwork live stream than a teamwork slash mentorship live stream, which is fine. I'll just put that in the title.
Right, right. Um, but I think yeah, I don't know. There's an important lesson that I probably learned along the way, that life kind of has life has a very odd way of being really beautiful, but the reality of living that life can really suck. And in working and well, in working in really terrible jobs where I could barely really scrape by, um, also where there was a very limited future, um, going into then a time where I had absolutely zero time for myself, at least from an outsider's perspective, given that I didn't really have time to go on vacations or things that people assume that people need to do. Um, working 7 days a week. These are all things that really sucked at the time. But in doing all of that stuff, the beauty of life really came out. And all I really needed to do to see it was to grit my teeth and get through that part. Because at the end, I became, well, like one of the things you brought up about having a salary, the likes of which you hadn't seen before because this was your first job out of college. Like being able to do all those things for yourself and being able to give back really provides you a lot of strength that I don't think people really appreciate. Because it's one thing to be able to get by in life for yourself, but it's another thing entirely to have the feeling that you could actually help someone else get through life too because of all the things that you did. And really that just comes down to hard work and kind of not being a pain in the ass. I don't know.
That'd be great if we had less people with less pains in the ass. I would say that. That is absolutely right. It would be nice if, but I would also say though, if you got to deal with those people, that makes you stronger in other ways too. If you can, sometimes it erodes you, but there are those battles you pick where you go, not this time. I've put up with this for a long time because it was professional, but it's escalated to the point where I need to deal with it. I think those battles are worth fighting.
That's kind of why I preface the life is beautiful thing with reality sucks, because the reality of it is that those kinds of things will always be there. But the goal is not to be one of those obstacles yourself.
And that is something I at least will try to do in mentoring forward. I'm actually, so ever since we did the mentorship program, which will of course be another time, but it leads on to what we're ending with, which is don't let yourself go. Keep, because once you let yourself go, it's really hard to get it back. I mean, for me, it's really easy to just let go. And if you're not getting a support system to kind of help get yourself back together, and you're maintaining your personal fitness, and you've got healthy goals in life, and you're taking care of people, if you're not doing that, man, it sucks, because you're not going to be as sharp, and you're going to take a long time to get back. So for me, I just got back into the gym. There's a Lifetime gym that's around here, and I can actually swim again. And I'm going, dude, this is how I got excited for physical chemistry, even though I hated the class.
Yeah.
I got to do something beforehand that gets my blood pumping. And then now I can actually cheer up the guy next to me. Like Stefan, for example. He and I had a very similar negative attitude about some things. And it was just great to be able to play off of that. And if I can cheer him up, that's something else. So being able to cheer other people up and be strong for them, you get enough people like that working in a team, you finally can actually do something that you didn't think possible. And for our case, I mean, I think Rose's quote was, if you have a perfect team, you're living in Neverland, or you're living in a fantasy. And she posts, well, I guess I'm living in a fantasy then. And then just posts our picture of our group on Facebook. And that was so great because, well, you never really thought it would happen that way. And so many other groups didn't have it that way. So it gave me a sense of gratitude that I didn't have before.
Right. Yeah. I think it's important to try to keep up your end of the whole supportive teamwork vein, even a little bit. Because like you said, when you're out of it for a while, it is hard to get back in, because I think you end up alienating yourself from any opportunity for you even to get back in. And that's something to always keep your eye on, as opportunity. If you If you let opportunity go away, you may not know where to look for it next.
And that ties in so well with what you said about when you're working at work, you're trying to make sure that your character and improvement as an employee will be the true you when you're in an interview.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't have to try and fake it. And it's so much easier to just be your true self in an interview. So when you get stressed out, that's still you, but you're giving your character and your history with a sense of dignity. There's a sense of humility, but also strength and all that you can't exactly portray if you're not living it. So
Right.
that's an encouragement to anyone watching or to anyone who will watch is find a way to still maintain that and get your teams to function well and find a way to do the self-maintenance that you need so people can rely on you when things get tough, because life gets tough. And it was great to have awesome teams like in school where now you're not in on your own. You really can help out. And if we had a weaker team, let's say we had people that really we didn't have enough time to take care of each other, that would have sucked. And that wasn't the case. And it's a model for me for as time goes on. I want to have more teams like that where people are taking care of me, I'm taking care of them. There's a division of labor. There's a real social dynamic that you can take care of them. Oh, I'm not doing so well here, and then you help out. The synergy is something that I've been missing for a long time. So, Matt, thanks for giving your input too on all this.
Oh, sure. You're welcome. Sorry, my video didn't end up working, but at least my audio did.
It did, and you know what? This is just a great practice stream to get everything going for the next one. So now we've got something to work with. And I know you're coming off of a 5-day work week, and it's hard to maintain focus for this long, which you did. I think you did a decent job for everything that we had to deal with for the startup, which is stressful. Yeah, that was about 2 hours. So
okay, wow, that really did fly by.
It did.
Pretty good for a podcast noob like myself.
Hey, and then the good thing is now you can use this for whatever you want. I mean, this is your video just as much as mine. I mean, you can share it. You're in it. It's audio, so it's just a YouTube file that you can download, and then before you know it, that's it. So let me end the stream, and then we'll keep talking offline here.
Okay.
So everybody, thanks again for listening. It wasn't quite what the title was, and it was a real great opportunity to talk again with Matt here. So I'll put in the timestamps for when we actually focused on different pieces that you might want to see. And thanks again for watching.